Alien Romulus is a good movie, and honestly, I wish I could have enjoyed it a little bit more. Maybe it's my own fault for wanting the prequels to continue to follow David's story. I remember when Covenant came out, not too long after that, news would surface that there weren't any more plans for Alien prequels. The Alien prequels were supposed to give us a story into the origins of the xenomorph, as well as the species that created them. Prometheus is far from a good movie, but it sets the foundation to build our world around David, our offbeat antagonist android who was supposed to be the mastermind behind the creation of the iconic alien. Prometheus needed to do one thing: establish the existence of the engineers. The engineers were an alien species that could or could not be the gods referred to in ancient artifacts and sculptures around the world. For example, I'm pretty sure the Prometheus engineers created Jesus in this universe. There's some deleted scenes, but overall the movie never really answers it. It's a nice theory that ties into how the aliens built our world. I could get behind this. Throughout the film, David is infatuated with the engineers' technology to create an otherwise enhanced life. Along with a science team led by Dr. Shaw, David becomes more proactive about testing how efficient their technology is, going so far as to use it on Dr. Shaw's partner. This science team came here specifically to find the engineers and figure out why human life was created. So this is the only movie that doesn't have alien in the title because it's clearly intended to rebrand or expand the franchise. But it was met with a pretty poor reception. There weren't any xenomorphs in the movie at all, and it was hard to pinpoint the plot of the movie. Originally, it seems like an exploration mission, but they don't really discover much. A lot of the clues behind the engineers and their technology are left up to a mystery. It slowly transforms into almost a murder mystery as David poisons Shaw's husband, which then infects Shaw. She ends up giving birth to some weird squid alien. Then to top it all off, Weyland on board, trying to seek a second chance at life, is admirable, but ultimately pointless. This was supposed to be the climax of the movie, and it felt like a letdown. We spent the whole film developing Shaw and David, and the climax is about Weyland? I do appreciate the idea to expand the Alien universe, not just with some random action movies like Requiem, but to actually expand its lore. Alien Covenant is the movie that managed to salvage the only intriguing plot point from Prometheus, the creation of the xenomorphs in this black goo. It explores the central plot of the prequel films, which is the obsession with the creation of life, and how to find the most efficient life, which comes into play later. The difference in this movie is that David, the android, is creating the life and exploring it, not humans. The movie is decently fun with some cool action scenes. It's not as much of a science expedition, but more of an action movie. Michael Fassbender really carries this film in particular, but I also do like many of the characters. I feel like this film had a good first act to establish some characters with their traits and relationships, like Daniels. The engineers were all but written out of this movie. There were a few callbacks and a flashback, but nothing more. It's mostly David experimenting with the alien technology that he found on the ship and Prometheus. After luring the Covenant crew onto a remote planet, he begins to test it on them. We see variations of xenomorphs going around killing the survivors, but this film is clearly meant to be a deeper dive into how the xenomorphs were created and tested. But this film was also poorly received and criticized, that the Ark was completely abandoned. The film ends with David impersonating the other android, Walter, to get on board and infect the Covenant crew with its 2,000 colonists who was heading to Orgai 6. So 7 years ago, I saw Covenant in theaters and was genuinely excited to see a third. I didn't care if the movie sucked or if the series sucked, just give it to me in its entirety. Let me see all 3 parts and let's see if it comes together. But Ridley Scott is pretty stubborn, and at this old age in the stage of his legendary career, he couldn't be bothered to push for a third film and instead went back to make Romulus. Maybe Covenant has something to do with the ship originally found in Alien, but I guess we'll never know. It's disappointing as a fan of this franchise that we'll have an unfinished conclusion to this universe. Michael Fassbender's performance being wasted and the rest of us just having to move on, as there's this giant gap between Covenant and Alien that this third entry could have filled in. Like, how does the company know about the xenomorph in the first place, or how could they have found one from Ridley's ship, or what happened to the Covenant and its 2,000 colonists headed to Orgai 6? I guess it could have just been marked as missing. David does send a message that they're still heading to Orgai 6 at the end of the Covenant movie. Now, Alien Earth is set to release in summer 2025, and I hope that show can fill in these gaps. I think it'd be really interesting for the show to build the Alien universe. I mean, it's set 2 years before Alien, so it is in that gap period I talked about before. This show has a lot of potential to rebuild the Alien franchise. It's not too late. We haven't gotten too far off course. In reality, it's 3 OGs and 3 prequels. Sure, there are others, but, it doesn't really matter. The biggest issue is that the prequels aren't really strung together yet. I was really hoping Romulus would be that film. Sure, I love some good horror movies, but I was pretty disappointed when I heard a third entry wasn't coming. And then I was really disappointed when I heard Romulus wasn't part of the prequel story at all. It was just disappointing to my expectations, which I guess are my own fault. For what it's worth, Romulus is pretty good. It feels like an OG Alien film. The characters really make the movie, and I always felt I knew just as much as them as the story was going on. I never felt like I knew more than them or how to survive the alien xenomorphs better. Each interaction was filled with a good amount of suspense that really made me on the edge of my seat because I kind of cared about these characters. I feel like the opening 20 minutes were enough to really sell these characters that maybe Prometheus and to an extent Covenant was missing. I wanted to understand where these characters were coming from and why their motivations would lead them to be so reckless, and I feel like the opening act did that pretty well, especially with their android Andy. The film really took an interesting turn with this chip that was inserted into Andy that would give him the information he would need to know about the alien xenomorph. These kids have no idea what they're dealing with, but handle it pretty realistically. They aren't too hollow, but show a reasonable amount of fear and anxiety with dealing with an overpowered enemy. But the film really picks up when one of the kids gets impregnated with the alien parasite. The most interesting part of this scene is that Andy had just been given his new chip from the company, who, as we know, is trying to study the creature. He closes the door to separate the parasite from attacking the kids, but I wonder with this new programming if he purposely chose to close it a little late. It's because later in the movie, he does close the door on time and none of the parasites get through. So maybe he did let it through the first time to see how it would react with the humans so they could study it. All part of this programming from this new chip that they put in him. Rain has tried to survive the infestations while not entirely trusting the droid leading them. Plenty of times Andy seems super helpful, but it's pretty clear that he has an alternative mission, which is revealed a little bit later. The most eerie part of Alien is that the Weyland company knows of the xenomorphs and has been wanting to study them. This goes back to the first original Alien, when the androids had the desire to fulfill the company's needs and study the xenomorph. We see this throughout the prequels as well. Romulus takes a new turn where it shows us how the black goo mixes with a human baby. The androids do refer to building a better species, and I guess this weird engineer hybrid is that superior species. The journey throughout the Romulus space station is very creepy. The other prequels were missing this kind of menacing feel of suspense. I guess the beginning of Covenant might have had this, but I didn't feel this in Prometheus at all. And the thrill every step along the way throughout the story really always kept me captivated. I'm looking forward to see how Alien Earth fills the prequel gaps. This does take place 2 years before the original Alien, so about 22 years before Alien Romulus, which means we probably won't see Rain or Andy in this one. But yes, I am looking forward to seeing the conclusion for their story as well. Let me know if you like Alien Romulus and what you're looking forward to seeing in Alien Earth. Talk to you later.